Hello students, this is Waqar Ahmed, your economics teacher from Cambridge International School, Dasuha. And as you are aware, we have started a new book, Indian Economic Development. And while you will start writing the notes of this book, you are expected to write notes in a separate notebook, not in the notebook of macroeconomics. Even though you must have some pages left in that notebook, we will utilize those pages at a later stage. And as far as this chapter is concerned, I told you yesterday as well that these are the topics which we will be covering, and in yesterday's class we covered low level of economic development and agricultural sector. In today's class we are going to cover the situation of industrial sector and the situation of foreign trade on the eve of independence. And before moving on to the new chapter, let us recall the teachings of the last lesson. Means we shall have a look at the low level causes of low level of economic development and agricultural stagnation. Now the main motive or main purpose of Britishers was to reorient the Indian economy. Earlier India used to be the biggest supplier of finished product, but after Britishers India became a supplier of raw material, and that too exclusively to Britishers only. And why did Britishers did this? To protect and promote their rapidly growing, rapidly expanding industrial sector. Okay. Then some studies were done, as we discussed yesterday as well, and out of those studies, the study of Mr. V.K.R.V. Rao, in which he estimated that the real growth in output was, or we can say in today's terms, the rate of economic development was only 2% per year, whereas the rate of increase of per capita income was only half a percentage point per year. And as we compared as well, nowadays since last 30 years it is around 6 to 9%. And as far as per capita income is concerned, India is fastly moving towards into median income group. So kind of the situation of economic parameters was abysmal. Then the causes of agricultural stagnation were land settlement system, and Britishers followed zamindari system, in which the onus or responsibility of rent collection was on zamindars. So to avoid fine and to avoid penalty, the zamindars became kind of rigid or inhuman, and they collected rent whatsoever was the condition of the farmer, which led to creation of social tension. Then low productivity, there was no use or minimal use of fertilizers, there was no use of equipments, farmers were dependent on rain for irrigation. So all these led to low level of productivity. Then commercialization of agriculture, in which farmers, because of promotion of Britishers, started growing cash crops or payment crops instead of subsistence crops, which definitely gave some money to the farmers, but at an aggregate level or at a macro level, it led to the situation of frequent famines in India. So these were the causes of agricultural stagnation. Now in industrial sector, first point is systematic deindustrialization, which may come in as a 1 mark question. So the meaning of systematic deindustrialization is the British government first made India an exporter of raw material for British industries, and at second point, those raw materials were used by British industries, and then the finished product were exported from Britain to India, means India became an importer at this point, and the competition or the homemade industries were kind of finished, because Britishers were producing through the top of the line machinery at that point of time. So their goods were of same quality, their goods were cheap. Why goods were cheap? Because they were getting raw material at negligible cost from India. So at all the levels, Indian people, Indian industry, Indian artisans, all were at loss. Who was making the profits? Who was raking the mullah? The profits were being taken away by the Britishers, as you can easily understand. Then what was the effect of this systematic deindustrialization on the handicrafts industry? And we can simply say in one words, rise in unemployment. Why rise in unemployment? As you can see on your screen, then means there was dearth or scarcity of raw material, so there was nothing for the artisans to produce. They left their industries and they became, instead of finest handicrafts producers or finest artisans of the world, they became a simple laborer. So means there was exodus, or there was too much supply of labor. And why was that? Because the handicraft industry was destroyed. These pupils have got nothing to do, they were unable to use their skills. So what happened to them? They became simple laborers, and some of them migrated to cities, worked there as a laborer, or as some of them did petty jobs in cities, some stayed back in villages and became landless farmers or landless laborers. So the effect on handicraft industries was that it gave rise to unemployment in urban areas as well as in rural areas. As far as modern industrial sector is considered during British Raj, there were very few industries situated in India at that point of time, and those industries were situated in such a manner. You must have studied this, some part of this in your class 10th SST as well, that the capital was given by Indian zamindars and maharajas, and the technical know-how was available with Western educated engineers or Britishers or French people or Dutch people who were in India at that point of time. So modern industries were basically concentrated in Maharashtra and Gujarat, and those industries were basically cotton and jute textile mills. Cotton textile mills were situated in Maharashtra and Gujarat, and whereas jute is considered, jute was because mainly produced which is now Bangladesh. So jute industry was situated in that area which is now Bangladesh and Paschim Bengal. Then some industrialists established steel and iron industries as well, and the first biggest Indian owned industry was established by Jamshedji Tata as the Tata Iron and Steel Company, TISCO, in 1907. TISCO looks like disco and Kisco, but you can remember by rhyming it, TISCO, Kisco and disco. So, but it is TISCO, not Kisco or disco. You can understand that much. So TISCO was established in 1907, in which is now known as Jamshedpur. And why Jamshedpur? Because TISCO was established by Jamshedji Tata, who used to be kind of grandfather of Mr. Ratan Tata, not exact grandfather, but in relation grandfather of Mr. Ratan Tata. So, and after Second World War, some sugar, cement and paper industries came up. And why these industries came up? Because during Second World War, Germany bombarded Britain so much that there was kind of insecurity in the mind of rich Britishers, that if we established or we invested too much money in here, then again something might happen and our industries will be destroyed as well. So out of security reason, not because they started loving Indians or something like that or change of heart, no, but because of their own sound investment decision to diversify their risk, some of the wealthy Britishers established their factories in India. So, this was the cause that we can see after Second World War some paper, sugar and cement industries were established in India. So, this was the situation of modern industrial sector during British Raj. Then there was no capital goods industry, and as we have studied in macroeconomics, and I have told you that the concepts we learned in macroeconomics will be handy while we study Indian economic development. So, there was no capital goods industry, means there was no industry in India at that point of time which used to produce machinery which can further be used to produce other goods. Machineries, all type of machineries were imported from abroad and particularly from Britain. Then low growth rate of GDP, means whatever the growth rate of GDP was, we discussed that it was around 2% year on year. The share of industrial sector was very small in that. The dominant sector was agriculture. Then limited role of public sector. Public sector industries are those industries which are owned and operated by government, and at that point of time in India all the big industries were owned and operated by Britishers. So, whatever they established was not because they wish to provide facilities to Indians, as you can understand, it was for their own ease of administration, so that they could easily administer, easily rule all over India. And out of these public sector industries, they established very famously railways, power generation, communication, ports, telegraph as well. But there was limited role of these industries in industrial development, because these industries, the primary aim or primary focus of these industries was to serve the British interest, to serve their masters, not to serve, let us leave simple people of India or citizens of India. They were not even interested in serving wealthy Indians and their industries. So, there was limited role of public sector in industrial sector or in industrial development at that point of time, although public sector is very important for establishment and flourishing of industrial sector. Now, one of the very famous term which is drain of Indian wealth, you must have heard brain drain as of now, means when Indian government gives subsidy on the education for the students of IIT and IIM, and when they are ready to join the job market, they moves to North America, they moves to Europe, they moves to other countries where they earn a lot of money. So, this is brain drain, but now here we will be talking about drain of Indian wealth. So, how does it happens? As you are aware, and we have discussed it so many times, then now it must be on your fingertips. India became exporter of raw material. So, Britishers need to pay us. Then India became importer of finished product, and we need to pay them. So, when export surplus happens when you are importing more and you are exporting, you are importing less and you are exporting more. And this was the question. Now comes foreign trade, and the British policies of trade, tariff and production changed the structure, composition and volume of India's foreign trade. And examiner might ask this particular question, that what was the policies or what were the rules adopted by Britishers which changed the structure or which changed the composition or which changed the volume of India's foreign trade. So, let us dive into this. First is structure and composition of foreign trade, and as I have said it at least 4 to 5 times till now, that India became supplier of raw material. And what was that raw material? That raw material was silk, cotton, wool, sugar, indigo, jute. India became exporter of these raw material, and then importer of finished product. What were those finished products? They were cotton, silk, woolen cloths, capital good industries, machineries from Britain. So, this was the first change. Then Britain did not allow any other country to do foreign trade with India, means Britain virtually dominated, or there was the monopoly of Britishers over the foreign trade of India, although they used to say that they are serving India. That was a joke. And then what happened later on, the Suez Canal, which let me, as we are virtually connected, so it is just like impossible, not impossible means a bit of inconvenient to make you understand, but I will give you an idea, and you can see it on map, that if you are exporting or importing through waterways, means like ships and containers, big containers, which is still the norm whatsoever the development of aviation industry. So these ships used to go like, if you have got simplest idea of Atlas, from India then downwards all towards Europe, and it took around 60 days or 70 days from India for a ship to reach from India to Britain. Now with the opening of Suez Canal, they have a bypass road, means they need not to circumvent half of the world to go to Britain. They have a bypass. They started from India, then they diverted their route around Egypt, and then they have this Suez Canal, which was a man-made canal, but it was able to carry big ships and containers into it, and it saved around half the time, means now a ship could go from India to Britain in around 30 days or even less. So what was the effect of the opening of Suez Canal? It decreased the time of transportation. So now Britishers can export more and more of raw material, and they can import into India more and more of finished product with greater speed, which kind of resulted in more exploitation of Indians. Now comes the term drain of Indian wealth, and there is a kind of similar term, brain drain, and you all are aware about the meaning of brain drain. Means when Indian educated people who get into the elite Indian institutions like IITs, IIMs, government gives subsidies to their education, they educate themselves in India, they become something in India, and when the time comes to serve the country, and basically it is not service, all of they are expected to work in private sector, still they can work in India for Indian companies. They move to North America, they move to Western European countries and all that. So that is brain drain. Now what is drain of Indian wealth? This was just to kind of refresh your memory. So what is drain of Indian wealth? Drain of Indian wealth means at that point of time India became exporter of raw material, meaning Britishers or British companies need to pay India, and India became importer of finished product. So based on the quantum, our exports were far more than our imports. So basically Britishers were net debtors and we were net creditors. They need to pay us. We created an export surplus, means whatever extra export we have made, they need to pay us into through gold or silver. Why gold or silver? Because there was not any kind of globalization at that point of time. There was no global currency like US dollar used to be nowadays. So most of the foreign trade used to happen in precious metals like gold or silver. So basically British government should have paid gold or silver to Indian companies, Indian businessmen, Indian people whose resources they were using in Britain, but they gave a very funny excuse, all means kind of it looks funny to us now, but at that point of time they gave an excuse, a logic, a reason behind not paying to India. They said that they are maintaining an office to protect Indian interests in front of British government or the Queen of Britain. They were representing us, means they were Britishers, they were representing Indians in front of other Britishers, and for that they need to set up an office, Indian office in Britain, governed by British people. So this looks funny now, but at that point of time this was their explanation. Then they said that they are saving ourselves from other colonial powers like the Dutch, the French, the Portuguese, and to safeguard Indians from those colonizers, although they were themselves colonizers. But this is the irony of the life, that whosoever is powerful, jiski lathi uski bhains. So they gave this excuse that they are representing our interest in front of Queen Victoria. Then they are safeguarding ourselves from other colonial powers, and for that they need to maintain a military which requires expenses. So these were the kind of excuses given by them. So India in reality, although India should have been recipient of a lot of gold and silver, which could have, means all these are assumptions now, which could have uplifted some economic conditions of Indians. But what they received excuses, they received logics, they received justifications, but they never received gold and silver, which should have been the actual case. And as far as the volume and direction of foreign trade is concerned, as we discussed, that there was exclusive right of Britishers over the foreign trade of India, still they allowed some other countries to do business with India, and basically those other countries were also governed by them. So they have this monopoly power, and those other countries were China, Ceylon, which is now known as Sri Lanka, and Persia, which is now known as Iran. So all these three have heavy business interest of Britishers, and India was a colony of Britain. So British government or British people virtually controlled the foreign trade of India. And an MCQ of 1 mark exists here, that which were the other countries than Britain with which India have foreign trade relations during the colonial period. So there were three countries: China, Ceylon, and Persia, or we can say China, Sri Lanka, and Iran. So this was the volume and direction of India's foreign trade. And as far as Suez Canal is concerned, I have given you an explanation here. You can read through it, and you can access the map in your NCERT or Sandeep Garg book, or I would prefer that you access the map on Google. You can access Google on your mobile and see for yourself what was the earlier route before Suez Canal and what was the route after the opening of Suez Canal. And 1 mark MCQ exists here as well, in which year the Suez Canal was opened for business, and the year was 1869. So that's it for today, students. In today's lesson, as you are aware, we talked about industrial sector, we talked about foreign trade of India on the eve of independence. We have also already covered low level of economic independence and agricultural sector. We will be covering other interesting sectors in our upcoming lessons. You need to have a separate notebook for Indian economic development. 3 hours examination will definitely happen from 1st of July. We will also have next series of MCQ from 1st June onwards. So all these things you need to keep in mind while, because you have enough time, and those 8 to 10 hours routine I think is genuinely going on daily about your studies, because studies are important and you are now a board class, and exams will happen in Feb, although Feb looks far away from now, but it is not that far, or it is not as far as you think it is, and mark my words for that. So that's it for today. Tomorrow we will continue the chapter. Till then, you know that you will remain inside so that you could remain healthy and you could remain safe. Bye.